Yeah, kid! Welcome everybody back to another episode of the Handsome Homebuyer podcast. I am Charles, aka the Handsome Homebuyer, twin brother to Captain Permit. Speaking of permits, this is sponsored by Captain Permit, 516-513-8838. Best sponsorship in the world. He doesn't have to pay a dime, and all he gets is publicity out of it. You guys need permits anywhere. Nassau County, Suffolk County, subdivisions, interior alterations, investors. If you're a mortgage broker, an attorney, a realtor, if you're a realtor, you certainly need us. Call us, 516-513-8838. If you got a house that smells like cat pee, is dated from the 1960s, has 6 inches of mold on the wall or human waste running past the basement steps, and newly commercial property. If you have land for development, I don't care how big, how small, strip malls, self-storage, assisted living, nursing homes, you name it, I want to buy it. It's that simple. I'm that low maintenance. 516-777-SOLD. Call me up. I'm quick. I'm easy. I'm low maintenance. I get back to you right away. I always tell you I love it or hate it, and this is why, and that's why people love me. All right. Today's guest has been a pretty long-time friend of mine at this point, right? How long?
Sir.
3 years? 4 years?
Maybe even a little longer.
So typically, I have guests on here with like a sexy Barry White kind of voice, right? Last week, you guys got a break. It was me, Dustin Cohen. It was two nasally Jewish guys going at it for 45 minutes, which was probably a little bit like fingers on a chalkboard, nails on a chalkboard for a while. But today, we're back to Barry White, and probably the sexiest of all the voices. Like I usually say, if real estate doesn't work out for him, which it definitely will because he's a chameleon, which I'm going to go over in a minute, he has a serious career in the 1-900 number business. All right. I'd like to welcome Mike Biancaniello, distressed real estate expert. So a little bit more of an intro about you before we start digging into it. So my new thing on the podcast is that I like to kind of like drill home a lesson, and based on my speakers, my guests' like strengths, I try to like highlight what they're really, really good at. So, I mean, Mike is good at a ton of different things, which is why I'm dubbing him the chameleon, like the king of all things real estate. And that relates to loan mods, mortgages, short sales, short-term business loans. I mean, there's probably a lot more that I don't know about, which I'm excited to dig into right now. But basically, the great thing about him is I remember, and we're going to get his kind of opinion in a little while about like how he sees the market and where he sees it going. And he deals with people across the country. So you're not just getting like kind of like a hyper local view. You're really getting a national view when you talk or you deal with somebody like Mike. He said to me, he's like, listen, the market's changing. Not a big deal. He's like, we'll just go and do something else. Like that's like the way his mind works. You get people that are like freaking out, continuing to buy houses, continuing to do whatever business they're doing, even though their business is disappearing, right? Because that's just what life is. Mike's like, not a big deal. I recognize it. We'll cut it. Let's always look for the next opportunity, and let's move on. So enough of just me. Good to have you, man.
Thank you for having me, Charles.
I appreciate you coming out, man.
I really appreciate it. It's been a long time coming.
Long time coming. So I guess let's start with a little bit of background. I know you're a local guy. You're a local Long Island guy, right?
Yes. Born and raised in Oakdale. Went to college out of state in Maryland, but then came back and been here since 2001. I've spent my entire professional career here.
Towson?
No, University of Maryland in College Park.
Oh shit, you were in title too, right?
Yes, I was in title. I started my career in real estate in title, and then in 2007 when the market dried up, the business I was in was based heavily on volume, which transactions went down, so did my business. At that point I transitioned into other things.
So I'm going to run down a list of stuff that I know you've done, and you let me know if I'm missing anything. So
sure.
And then I want to kind of like hit on each one of them if that's cool.
Sure.
So obviously you've done title. You've done an insane amount of mods.
Yeah.
Right? Probably one of the biggest mod operations around.
Our firm has done thousands. I myself have personally overseen maybe almost 1,000 myself, certainly over 500.
For those of you who don't know, that's a lot. An intense amount of short sale processing.
Yes.
Right?
11 years worth.
Mortgages.
Yep.
Short-term business loans.
Correct.
What am I missing?
Private and just, I guess if you wanted to call it hard money or asset-based lending as well, just because of our, all the people we come across in distressed real estate.
So, Jesus, I mean, where do we begin with this? So, with all these things, you kind of operate them as a hybrid, and you have them all available depending on how the market's moving, or you concentrate on one and then move into another. Like, how does that? Because that's a lot of shit to do.
It is. I think the first advantage that it gives us is flexibility. I don't want to ever be a one-trick pony. I think it's something as a business person is very dangerous. But even as a service provider, whether I'm dealing with someone on the buying side or the selling side of real estate, I really want to be able to listen to what they're trying to accomplish and then be able to help them fill the need. If I only knew how to do one thing, I'd be telling a lot of people I can't help you.
Wow. All right. No, see, it's interesting because I have the same school of thought as you, where I would like to know, like within real estate, let's say flips.
Sure.
I want, most guys, they just flip properties in Levittown, or Nassau County, whatever it is. They have this real niche thing.
Right.
For me, it's I want to know how to do rentals, buy and holds, new construction, everything there is, so that I can always be buying. But then there's people on the other side who are like, yo, if you do a million things, you can't do any of them well.
And that's a fair point. You can be jack of all trades, master of none. I mean, certainly that saying comes from somewhere. But I think that, again, with all the strategic alliances that we've made just in working every day, we've made some really strong partnerships along the way where it might not be myself directly, providing the service all the time. I may have to reach out to one of my strategic partners for assistance, but I always want to be well-rounded.
No, that's smart. And I want to touch on a little bit more about what you do before I delve into kind of the system aspect of that, because I think you're very good at that. You guys have found a way to... So you have a nationwide network, essentially. So when you do mods and shorts and things like that, you're doing it across the country.
Correct. We evolved with the times. With the law changes. I mean, we started into this back in 2007 where... no one was looking at the industry. It was completely unregulated. People were left to their own devices, which was very dangerous. In 2008, a lot of the attorney generals in all of the states got wise, and they cleaned up the industry. And we established a national network of attorneys in 46 different states around the country. And at that point, we started to build out a suite of products and services to help homeowners in distress.
Which, I mean, let's stop and think about that. First of all, for a second, ladies, you hearing that voice? You hearing that? I'm even getting a little tingly below the belt, not even guys. Anyway, let's stop and think, because you say it very nonchalantly, but dude, you have people sending you business in 46 states.
Correct.
With as lean of an operation or as as big of an operation as you need to have. You can scale up and down. That's insane. So and you don't use traditional forms of connection now. You don't even have social media.
No, we again build on relationships. The attorneys in the network refer a lot of business, outside realtors, marketing companies. It comes from so many different forms and fashions, because I think what happens too, when you look at people who are in the situation, talking about distressed borrowers, homeowners, when they get in the situations, I think they get so panicked that they reach out to many different types of people, to try to get help and advice. And, we've used that to our advantage marketing wise to gather up as much business as we can.
So I want to get to the exciting stuff, and then this way people understand a little bit more about what you do, and I want to see kind of how you feel about things.
Sure.
So basically, if you're a realtor, especially, or you're an attorney who has a short sale listing, or perhaps passes on a short sale listing because you're this is a nightmare. I don't know what to do. They take forever and they never close and I never get paid. And while I'd love to make, 4 to 6% like everybody talks about, I don't want to deal with this, mostly because you don't know, because you don't have the education. That's fine. It's also not the highest and best use of your time. For those people and many more, you got to know Mike Biancaniello. I mean, that's what he does. That's what he has 11 years experience doing. He knows the ins and outs and ups and downs of every servicer, every bank, every, just crazy nonsense thing that's involved with short sales. And it's a forever, like, the ball is always moving. Like, the game is always changing. Like, what works today doesn't work tomorrow. And that's why you can't just call up any random attorney to do this. You need somebody who's processing hundreds of these things at any given time. And only by seeing that volume will you know what's going on and how the game is changing, so you can get yours approved. I could speak from, I met Mike obviously from being involved, linked through a realtor and going through a process on some of these deals. They close, and I can't say that happens for most people. So, I mean, you got into processing shorts right after the collapse? Like, how did that happen?
Well, I think it came out of need. We were seeing initially in 2007 and 2008, the wave of modification requests was overwhelming. I mean, you're talking about literally millions of people who were in trouble and desperate.
Let me stop you there for a second. So you got out of title, and then you just kind of saw the market, and you were like, people are going to want to do mods, and you're like, let's do mods?
Exactly. Truthfully, one of my closest business alliances is a monster in the internet lead business, and in conversations with him, he just kept saying, I'm getting an enormous amount of requests for these modification leads. He's like, I don't even know what a modification is. So at that point, we looked into it, and that's how we stumbled into it. And then once we got into the modification industry, it was clear right out of the gate that if we wanted to do well, be successful, and really be long-term in this, we had to be well-rounded. And you could see right away, when you do a modification, the crux, the nut and bolt of a modification is what? Bringing a homeowner current and maybe giving them a cheaper payment. But in bringing them current, you're making these people enormously upside down on their home. At that point, the light bulb went off. And you're going to see that any of these people, at any point, if they job relocate, if they have health issues, if they need to sell for any reason, it's going to be a short. And then once I started to look even closer at it and really studied it, you realize, and it's come true, that short sales have even outlived the modification craze. They're still going, and they're still going really strong.
How do you feel about being in mods for a number of years? And listen, it's a valuable service, and there's a lot of people that become current and stay current, and they turn their life around, and it's great. But in general, as a whole, how do you feel about mods, and then how do you feel about mods when you first started doing them versus mods today when you have people that haven't been paying in 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 years?
That's a good question. For some people who are that far delinquent, a modification wouldn't even be an option. To answer your initial question, when we first started doing it, I mean, you know me personally, I'm very hands-on with homeowners. I want to protect them. I want to help them so bad, and I get very passionate.
Especially the older ladies.
Yes. I'm very protective of my old lady clients who people try to take advantage of. But we would try in the beginning to be, you got to do this. Trust me. You listen to me. You got to do this. I've learned over the years, every homeowner sitting in front of me is holding a different set of cards.
Yeah.
So as a single guy who's maybe 35 to 50 years old, maybe you got divorced, to live in a home by yourself that's $200,000 upside down, why would you want to do it? It's nuts. So for that person, maybe a modification is not the right option. However, if you're a borrower who has 3 kids in the home, you're going to live in the home for the next 30 years, your daughter loves the high school she's at and is fighting for a soccer scholarship, maybe getting a modification and staying in the home long term is the option for you.
I feel like that's probably a true story.
It is, and that's where you learn when you hear people out, when you truly listen to them. You know, some people have a need to stay. You know, whether or not I think financially it's the right thing. Sometimes, you know, what we want to do in life and the financial side doesn't always line up. And you realize with homes how personal it gets sometimes for people. But I think in most cases, if you're that far upside down, you really should consider a liquidation option and starting over.
You know, that explain like, and that's the thing I've seen with people as far as just the emotion. They get so emotionally caught up in the fact that like this is their house that they don't get it. Like I've had conversations with people like, listen, just think about this from a logical standpoint. You owe $600,000 today on a house that's worth $250,000, right? We'll make up numbers. If you were shopping for a house today, you wouldn't spend $600,000 on a house that was worth $250,000, would you? It just doesn't make sense. So why are you going to keep a house and pay $600,000 for a house that's worth $250,000?
The best call I get, I love when I get the call, is it's usually about 6 months after a short sale closes. The client, the seller, will call me up and be like, oh my God, you have no idea how much better my life is. And when I get that call,
oh yeah,
yeah,
it makes
all
sense.
The time. It
makes
does.
Sense.
Because people don't underestimate how much of a toll the stress of being in this situation takes on them. And once they get free of it, they're finally able to see what you were just saying, is that if you complete a short sale within 2 years, if you do the right things, you can buy a home again. And to Charles's point, instead of being on the wrong side of the market, meaning you owe $450,000 on a house worth $250,000, you can be on the right side of the market. There's opportunity out there right now for some really good buys. So if you get out of a bad situation, heal yourself the right way, you can move forward and do things the right way. It's hard sometimes to get people in the situation to see that, but the better as a real estate professional that you can help them see that, the more successful you'll be.
See, and this, I know all mod guys aren't created equal, right? So like some mod guys can get better deals than others. And then I've been called by friends or friends of friends to just give advice to certain people on the mod that they're receiving. And I feel like a lot of mod guys or attorneys, whoever, aren't explaining the nuts and bolts of the actual mod. So like I'll look at a person's paperwork and I'll say, do you realize that in 15 years from now, you have a balloon payment? Like your payment is $300 less than it is right now, which doesn't really impact, you know, your life. Like if you can't pay now, you're not gonna, it's $300 isn't saving you. But do you realize that you have this interest rate that's adjustable after 3 years, and you have a balloon payment of an insane amount of money in like 17 years or 15 years or something like that?
That's an excellent point. And I think if you had 100 homeowners in here who got modifications, a lot of them would be saying, you're very right. The first thing we do, I'm obviously partnered with a great law firm, Friedman Law Associates out in Hauppauge. The principal attorney there, Lee Friedman, is thorough and just someone that has a real consultative spirit. So any borrower that we do a modification for, we're always going to go over the terms soup to nuts, because to your point, there's a lot of clauses in there. And even today, the Making Home Affordable or HAMP or Obama program or any of the 900 nicknames that they gave this one single program, it no longer exists. So that rumor or dream of 2% for 5 years, which some people were getting for a time, it no longer exists. The going modification rate right now is typically in the fours. So if you're a borrower who's over 100K upside down on Long Island, there's a chance right now that you get a modification and your payment actually goes up, not down, because you're lumping in so much arrearage. And if that's the situation you're in, again, you should really consider a liquidation option. What I try to do with homeowners, obviously if they're out of state, it's on the phone. If they're in our office, we do it in person. Show them the math of it. And at that point, you need to ask a homeowner, you're in my office saying that you can't make a $2,200 mortgage payment. Why on earth would we work out a resolution that puts you in a $2,500 a month payment? You just said you can't afford 22. It's not going to work.
I want to address some fallacies and misconceptions in this, right? And I'll hit them one by one and let you comment on them.
Sure.
The fallacy of, oh, I have an attorney. I don't need to do a low and mod or a short sale. I'm going to get my house for free.
Nuts. The craziest. It amazes me because we still hear that stuff.
How often do you hear that? I hear that stuff all the time.
All the time. But when I hear it at first, it upsets me because it just proves that there's that many people out there giving people in tough situations really shitty advice. And I always caution homeowners, be careful who you're asking advice. It might be your best friend, but your best friend could be a moron. It could be a realtor, a realtor who's in your family, who knows real estate. It doesn't mean they know this. And that's why look before you leap has never been truer than in distressed real estate.
Yeah, this is like a forever changing, very niche kind of thing. So before, if you're a realtor who has a friend or a homeowner in this situation, if you're a homeowner, I encourage you to reach out to Mike, speak to him. He can kind of explain all the different avenues for you, whether it's a refinance option, a short sale liquidation option, or a modification option. And, any one of those could be a possibility. Another thing I think people need to understand, which I don't think they do, is, well, I guess the second before that. Do you see people getting another kind of half fallacy? Maybe it was true back in the day. I don't know if it's true so much now. Principal reductions.
We call that the unicorn in our office. It's like one of those, now you see it, now you don't. Bank of America, there was a stat they ran a while ago where when they were one of the largest servicers in the country, less than 3% of their loans qualified for principal reductions. And I think you could probably roll that stat out industry-wide. I mean, 97, 98% of people in this country would never qualify for a principal reduction. It's not going to happen.
So let me explain to everybody what that means. So basically, if you owe $600,000, 2 to 3% of people, the banks would say, you know what, we're going to reduce that amount to $500,000 or $450 or $550 or whatever it is, and now we're going to give you a modification and a new loan at that number. All right. Another thing I kind of want you to address with people is you borrowed $200,000, you stop paying your mortgage, and you owe $200,000, right? And you don't pay for 6 years. At 6 years, when you decide to look at your mortgage statement, what are you paying for? What is the bank lumping into that final number? Because I think people don't understand exactly what they now have to pay for when they've been delinquent on a mortgage.
Sure, you're paying all of your past due mortgage payments, principal and interest. You're paying the past due taxes and insurance, which the banks are masters at bulking up. And you're also going to pay for a ton of late fees, legal charges, just everything but the kitchen sink. I mean, the banks, once you get to a point of true delinquency, you're really at the mercy of the bank fee-wise. And most of the time, once you reach past 3 months, in which you're discussing people who are behind 5 years. So obviously it's a much larger number, but unless you can cut the bank a one lump sum check, they won't speak to you. So imagine being a homeowner who lost their job, who's 200 grand behind. Good luck to you.
Jesus. So basically, you stop paying, they're gonna charge you. They're gonna pay your taxes and insurance for you, but they're gonna lump it on.
And then some.
Your interest, penalties, and then obviously the payments that you're not making.
Correct.
Right. If something needs to get repaired on the property, you need to send out like a property preservation company. That stuff get lumped on. At the end of the day, like they're not gonna forget about that stuff. So you get to a point. So I guess this kind of goes back to my question before: is like, how do you see mods kind of developing for people in that time frame over the last 7 years? Like, did they make a lot more sense closer to the crash, and then as you go farther out, it doesn't make sense?
Yeah, right now, it's interesting because we'll still get plenty of requests for modification, but to your point, because of some of the people, the amount of delinquency that they have, it's impossible. And because of the change in programs, programs like Making Home Affordable ending, I do agree that mods are less attractive than they once were. I think the thing that scares me is, I think coming up on the horizon, some people say the end of 2019, I think it's going to be more 2020-ish. There's going to be a greater need for modifications again.
I was just going to ask you that.
Some of the marketing indicators, I don't want to get specific, but that we look at tell us that. And it scares me because, they always say history repeats itself, and you're almost seeing it happening again. And what worries me is the programs are gone. So we're going to have a ton of people again who need help, but the programs aren't going to be there. What the government and the big banks do with it down the road, I don't know.
So it kind of seems like mods were huge, and then for the last X amount of years, mods seem to have kind of like tapered down a little bit.
3 or 4 years, yeah.
And now you're seeing an uptick in the mod request, basically.
Yeah, and it's gaining momentum very slowly. But it
always does.
It's something that, the more I read, the more I research, you can see it coming again.
I mean, and this is what people like, I don't know if people understand. Real estate market is not the stock market. It's not up one day and down the next day. It's a very it's like every day nothing changes, but all of a sudden one day everything's different. Well, it wasn't. If you were watching it, right? If you have access to people like Mike, they're watching the stats on a monthly basis. They're watching it move, right? So, I mean, obviously, it's going to keep going in that direction. Now, the question I have for you is, are these, how delinquent are these people? And then when were their loans originated? Like, is this a new group of people that have just purchased in the last, 3 years? Or are these, older loans that people are just coming on hard times? Obviously, there's always steady delinquency across a market, and then you have spikes in 2007, 2008. It was fucking free for all, right? So I don't know if you have this information. If you don't, it's cool.
I think this is more, I'll say my opinion is, when the market crashed in 2007, a lot of people fell behind, obviously, because they had to, out of necessity. They lost their business, their job, whatever. But I think over the years, it's been 10 years, 11 years now, really, the mindset of our country has changed, where people are more comfortable going behind on their mortgage. When I talk to people like my dad is 69 years old. When I explain to him what I do for a living, my dad looks at me like I'm an alien. He doesn't understand the concept of someone not paying their mortgage. But I think people have gotten very comfortable with it, and I think it's a dangerous concept because you can't count on the government and the banks to do it right, because they've just proved to you the last 11 years that they don't. So, be wise when you fall behind on your mortgage.
Jesus Christ. Well, is your dad's first generation? Was he?
Yeah, first generation, and it. Hey, listen, I'm old school Italian, but there's plenty of old school Irish, Jewish, Polish, whatever ethnic background you come from, where people are like, "Oh my God, I'd rather eat beans and live in a dumpster than not pay my mortgage."
Yeah.
When I see those people, I usually stand up at the table and shake their hand, because there's less of those people out there. And again, there's people who fall behind with real circumstance, with real problems, but there's certainly people out there who try to take advantage of the system. The challenge now is, and I'm telling you as a guy who loves to beat up banks for a living, it's harder to do now. The modifications, the deals we can work out aren't nearly as attractive for the homeowner as it once was. And when the market crashes again, I don't know if Trump or whoever is in office brings back these programs. You simply don't know what the future holds.
I mean, obviously you don't have a crystal ball, but I mean, I'm in agreement with you. I think a lot of people think we're both nuts, but either that or they just don't want to face it. I think the end is not so far away. I think even a little bit before you. I'm one of those Q4 2019 guys.
A lot of people are. Definitely.
But, I mean, what, I don't even know what the hell I was going to say about that. All right, well, we'll drop this stuff together. Don't you hate when that happens?
I do.
Senior moment at 39 years old. People, if you're under 35, I got to let you know, at 35, stuff just starts to break. So if you're under 35, something to look forward to. If you're over 35, you understand what I'm saying. So I want to dive into more like the meat and potatoes of like shorts, the short sale process, because I know that you process shorts for other attorneys.
Yes.
Right? And I know that you do a ton of processing for realtors. And I want the real estate community to understand what the process is behind like doing a short sale, right? Like so that they can better explain to their clients so that they're not completely clueless. So I want to kind of like start there. Like it's a pretty straightforward process. It's very time consuming. I mean, Mike's a saint for doing it. Lord knows I wouldn't have the strength to do what he does. So if you're a realtor, I can't stress this enough. This is not something you want to try to do. This isn't like a fun thing you want to like test out. All right. This isn't like, oh, you know what? Like I want to ride motorcycles, whatever. No, this is like a grueling, annoying, confusing, torturous process if you don't have a system for it and you don't know exactly what you're doing. So like on a real basic level, from like a third-party authorization type of quick overview, how does a short sale process work?
Well, you said something earlier on in the podcast about attorneys and realtors turning or steering away from short sales. I think that's so dangerous because there's so many of those transactions being done specifically here on Long Island right now. Why would you automatically say no to a certain percentage of business? That just doesn't make sense to me. The thing that I would tell real estate attorneys and realtors is we just need to get smart, have a plan, and these things called short sales that are so scary will become less scary. I think the thing that frightens people is always the unknown. But if you make certain partnerships with people like myself, the firm that I'm with, people like Charles, you'll see that there's people out there pulling off these transactions effectively. And what we do is very simple. We let the realtor be the realtor, and as the law firm, we do what we're supposed to do. So when a realtor takes a listing, ideally that's when we would like to be involved in the process right from the beginning, because it allows us to do due diligence. By due diligence, I mean run a lien search and contact the bank and take them through a very long questionnaire. At that point, we now know what we're facing. Understand people who are behind on their mortgage. A lot of these people, in some cases, don't know if they have a second mortgage. They don't know if they owe Petro money. They don't know if they owe from an Amex credit card. So we run a lien search. We contact the bank. So we learn everything right from the onset of the deal. While we're doing that, okay, so we're playing the role of the firm, we're letting the realtor do their thing, which is list the property, market it, find a buyer, and present us with an offer. Once the offer is in, we go under contract, collect all the documentation for short sale from the seller, submit the package. We work through the negotiation process with the lender. We try to set up a communication system that's transparent with everyone involved. And then we work to close. Now, when I say work to close, that's when the real game begins. Obviously, at a certain point of short sale, when we submit an offer, inevitably the bank's going to come back to us with an answer. In most cases, that answer is a counter offer. And then at that point, that's when I feel like the realtor and our firm really join forces, and then if there's a buyer involved, obviously we want them to help too, because part of what we have to accomplish is we have to beat up the bank. We have to present some of the flaws of the property to get the bank to come down. And then inevitably we agree upon a number and move to close. So soup to nuts, that's the simplified version of the short sale process.
Okay. So, a couple of things I want to touch on within that and kind of expand on. So,
Sure.
when Mike says beat up the banks, what he's basically saying is this, Wells Fargo, whoever, bank, whatever it is, they're not here. They're not in Levittown or Merrick or Wantor or Ronkonkoma. They're not here seeing the house. They're sending a representative to look at it. So they have no idea necessarily that there's 14 cats in the house that are pissing everywhere. There's fleas jumping out the door. There's holes in the roof. They look on a computer screen. They look on Zillow, right? They look at some pictures and they decide what value is. That's when it's a team effort where everybody has to join together and say, listen, here's documentation or whatever it is, whatever you want to do to show, say, listen, this is what the true value of this is worth. It's been on the market. This is what the market is deciding. It doesn't matter what Zillow or anybody else says. The only thing that matters is what the market says, right? So there's that. Another thing I think people need to understand more about is second mortgages and liens and lines of credit, right? So I think people freak out and they're like, oh, there's a second mortgage, so I owe all this money. When in actuality, the second mortgage usually just goes away for a nominal fee.
Yeah, I think, again, knowledge is power. We try to run the lien search. Conventional wisdom, right? If someone's behind on their mortgage, their first mortgage of their primary residence, chances are they're behind on other bills. So what happens to these borrowers when they end up in this situation is over the years that they're behind, so much is happening to them that they stop opening the mail. They put their head in the sand, and these debts accrue and they all end up attached to property. It doesn't mean a deal is dead. It means a deal needs to be done creatively. It means we need to have solutions for these challenges, but by no means does it mean that the deal cannot get to the finish line. In this case, we need to come up with a plan. In some cases, the banks will certainly assist with second mortgages, second liens, things of that nature, HOA fees. And then when it comes to those extra little judgments, again, if everyone's working together, in other words, the realtors, the attorneys, buyer and seller, we can certainly overcome any of those other little debts.
So what people have to understand is if you have a person or whoever and they owe $200,000 on a first mortgage and $200,000 on a second mortgage and the house is worth $150,000, right? But if they have, unpaid credit cards, an IRS lien, they had plastic surgery that they never paid for, you name it. It's really important. Same way with Captain Permit. I tell everybody, call us up front, let us do a CO search so you know what you're getting into before you start. Mike is very thorough and does a lien search on these things before anything starts, because if you have a guy or a girl that has $300,000 in IRS, state income tax, credit card debt, and the house is worth $150,000 and they owe $400,000 on the house in addition to the IRS and credit card debt, this thing might never close. God himself could not get this thing to come in at a number that the market will pay. So at that point, maybe you just don't waste your time. The thing gets foreclosed on, and that's the only way that all those liens and judgments can be dealt with. So before, I've heard of agents spending a year, finally get a buyer for a property, and then all of a sudden they find out there's $100,000 worth of judgments that can't be removed. And then that's it. So the point is, align yourself with somebody like Mike who gets it, who has done thousands of these, who does things the right way so you don't waste your time, and let him do what he does. When he tells you to do something, do it. When he says, let me handle things, let him handle it. It's that simple. I want to talk about values, the banks, the market, and kind of like how you've seen things progressing in the last, let's say, 12 months as far as how easy or hard it is to get deals done, pricing, investor quality, investor grade product versus, end user short sale, resales, things like that.
Sure. There was a period of years where we were killing the banks, and buyers, I think, were really just hammering the banks, getting deal after deal. There were certain servicers and investors that, it was possible to do very, very profitable flips. And Charles mentioned something earlier on in the podcast that you have to change with the times because the game is always changing. There's definitely been a shift. The banks have gotten smarter. They understand that people are making great profit. You've even seen some servicers themselves getting into fixing and flipping and wholesaling because they've watched people like Charles do it successfully for so long. And what they've done is they've tightened the belt. There's certain investors out there. Let's start with the government. FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. If you're an investor, a true fix and flipper, you're wasting your time bidding on these properties because there's just not going to be enough meat on the bone for you to do what you want to do. And at that point, even some of the other investors, you take a look at a servicer like Caliber. Caliber Home Loans was a servicer for years. They did modifications, short sales. At this point, the only workout option they will do is deed and lose. Why? Because they're fixing and flipping homes.
Yeah.
So I think as an investor, it's a little scary. Most of the short sales that we're still doing them very successfully, but I would say a lot more of them are end users, people who are going to live in the home, or even investors that aren't necessarily fixing them and flipping them. Maybe these are properties that are being held and rented.
Yeah, I mean, I assume that, when the market was moving up very, very fast over the last number of years, like the bank would track this stuff. They would see a house get listed as a short sale, it would go under contract, it would be purchased, and then it would be renovated and resold, and a profit was made. But that's as the market's moving up. Then the banks get smarter about it, and they're like, maybe we should be flipping properties or whatever it is. And then now that prices have like kind of stalled, the after repair values aren't moving or maybe coming down a little bit, right? But the banks are still pushing. You have more guys in the game, so now the purchase price is up far more. The cost of construction is up huge, and now you have a compressed spread that just doesn't make money.
Yeah, and that's what people are facing right now. And I think that's why, when I always speak to realtors, one of the, you always ask them, how's the market, how's business, etc. The thing that you're hearing right now is properties are selling, just not as fast as they were a year ago or 2 years ago. And when I speak to, my investors, my fix and flippers, how you doing with your resales? They're selling. It's taking a little longer, and, I'm just not getting the number I want. When I start hearing those things, that's when, you start to get nervous and you realize that a transition is coming. and things are starting to shift back because these are the things realtors and people were saying back in '06 and '07. Yeah.
See, I've only been in the game for 5 years, so I try to ask people, like, you were there then.
Yes.
And I'm sure it wasn't as sharp as a change as, like, movies or whatever would depict. I'm sure it was a slow progression.
Absolutely slow. And it happens, and like you said before, and then you wake up one day and it happened, but it's something that evolved very slowly over a couple of years, where unless you're paying attention, and I think this is where realtors and attorneys sometimes, if you're not truly focused on it 100% of the time, you might be an attorney where you were on trial for a while. Maybe this is the first short sale that's come in your door in a couple months. Things change constantly, so you got to be careful when you take on these deals, especially when from the buying side, you can get in trouble right now if you don't get in at the right number.
Yeah, no, and then you couple all this stuff with townships being stricter about permits and delays associated with that, and now, you know, a tight deal that you need to get out of in 6 months at this number takes 9 months or a year, and then all of a sudden you're upside down.
Well, what happened was distressed real estate as a business became a hot industry. And
sexy.
Yeah, and what happens when that happens is people get involved, and when people get involved, what do? They ruin it. And that's basically what has happened is people have gotten in this business. They've taken advantage so much that the banks have said, wait a second, people are taking advantage. And at that point, that's when they start to put, as I like to say, new hoops up for me to jump through. Yeah. And it happens really every year. Every year. The way we negotiated short sales last year was different than this year, and next year will probably change again.
It's a forever moving target. I mean, listen, I appreciate you coming out, man. You're good friend and valuable resource. People need to know you. They need to talk to you. If people want to get in touch with you, agents, other attorneys, etc., how do they do that?
I would just say the best way is my cell, 516-965-1643. Again, that's 516-965-1643. A very accessible guy. My phone is usually on from 8 to 8. And I'm really, I truly, whether you're an attorney, a realtor, a real estate professional, or even a homeowner, I care. I'm a human being. I try to do my job the right way. I want to sleep at night. I want to be able to look myself in the mirror, and you can only achieve that by doing the right thing by people. I want to thank you for having me on.
Always, man.
Been a fan of yours, and I've had a great amount of respect for you for a long time.
Thank you.
And for the people out there, I know, if you're listening to Charles's podcast, obviously you're a fan of his, but this is a person in this industry who actually has character and integrity. So realize that when you reach out to Charles to do business with him, not only is he savvy in business, which is important, but he's actually also a human being who was raised right.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And on that note, if you have a house that smells like cat pee or commercial property, call up the Handsome Home Buyer. We're not just flips. 516-77-SOLD. If you need permits, call the captain. 516-513-8838. We're out.